Hey guys, welcome to the South Park After Show on AfterBuzz TV. My name's Jeremy Rucker, and tonight we're talking about Episode 7, Season 19, Naughty Ninjas. So this episode revolves around the issue of police brutality in South Park and obviously around the country. And then the B plot is the kids joining this ninja club, which the townspeople confuse as members of ISIS. But before we get into the bigger issue of police brutality, I want to talk about my favorite part of the episode, which is it's the running gag with Cartman and the rest of the ninja kids, where he's trying to backstab someone, or he's trying to do whatever nefarious thing Cartman is known to do, and he's talking to his classmates, but it turns out they're not who he thought they were, because they're all wearing ninja garb. So he has to, sort of save face and pretend that everything he said was something else. So he can always be right. And the crescendo of this is near the end of the episode, when he has Kyle tied up in a chair, and he's sort of showing off all the evidence that proves that Kyle has been sabotaging their operation. And so he pulls the sheet off of Kyle's head, and it turns out it's not Kyle, it's Clyde. And Kyle is actually just in the front row, watching on as Cartman completely embarrasses himself in front of everybody. And so as a viewer, it's always fun to watch Cartman sort of get called out on his own tricks. And this is a great way of them doing that, because they did it like 3 or 4 times, and it kept being really, really, really funny. And honestly, that was probably my favorite part of the episode. But moving on to the police brutality aspect of it. What South Park's done really well throughout their entire existence is they've been able to satirize things and rip on ideas and rip on pop culture stuff or political stuff, especially recently, without really ever taking sides. And some people have given them grief for that. They think not everything deserves both sides of the argument, but they're not really making an argument. What they're doing is they're just satirizing, and they're calling out absurdities no matter where it comes from. So they're not left, they're not right. They don't have an agenda. They just like calling out the ridiculousness of people's reaction and sort of highlighting how absurd humans can be when it comes to groupthink. And they did a wonderful job with this here. And obviously, in this episode, as with many other South Park episodes, Randy Marsh sort of typifies the mindless follower of a trend or a product or what it may be. He did it with the Margaritaville episode, where he's one of the biggest culprits of overspending, or something Walmart comes this way, where he gets addicted to shopping, or the World of Warcraft episode. He's always sort of the first to jump on the bandwagon and then conveniently forget anything that used to be his moral code or used to be part of his personality, and it's great. And then usually, as is the case with this episode, the rest of the city sort of follows suit, and then it starts to snowball, and that's what you see here. And I think one of the most interesting parts of this episode, or one of the best way that to frame the issue that they're talking about, is through Officer Barbrady, who makes a reappearance after leaving the city, and becomes sort of the figurehead of bad, racist, evil cops, when actually he's probably the most innocent of the bunch. He's just woefully incompetent. And you see that after he gets fired he gets laid off the force from the mayor, and he goes home to his sick, mangy dog and just says, all I want to do is help people. All I want to do is be needed. And so it shows to highlight that he doesn't have negative intentions. He's just kind of put in the wrong place at the wrong time, and becomes a rallying point against a bigger cause that may not even be his fault. But on the other side of the spectrum, that is supposed to sympathize with, I guess, the good cops, so to speak. But then the other side is the rest of the police department, especially the police chief, who, when the townspeople go NWA on them and start flipping them off and everything, and tagging their cop cars and everything like that. And so the cops rebel by saying, "Oh, you don't want us to do our job? Well, we're going to spend our money and our free time preparing for a luau and preparing for a Hawaiian themed dance," which is pretty funny. And then obviously the townspeople come in after the homeless take over Soda Sopa, and the big joke is, oh, well, now they need them, right? They have this selective empathy towards the oppressed, but then when they don't want to do the down and dirty work, like removing the homeless from Soda Sopa or whatever it may be, all of a sudden they come crawling back. And I think that really does a great job of highlighting sort of how ridiculous both sides can be. Yeah, obviously there's a huge issues on the sides of police departments, but also this knee-jerk reactions on the other side from the PC left, so to speak, is almost as ridiculous if you look at it in a vacuum because of, it doesn't take into account the full situation. You don't have to agree with that interpretation, or even if it's true, you don't have to agree with what they think. But they do a great job sort of highlighting both sides of the issue while making it really funny. Anyway, that was our show for tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and download our show in the podcast section of the iTunes store. And we'll see you next time. Buzz you later.